So if you didn't know David and Cherie, that explains the slightly smug look in David's face when Cherie was introduced this morning. It's fantastic. That's my wife she's talking about, look in his face. I had it as well, so this is part of my team. As you've heard, I'm part of Scripture Union's work. I'm part of a local church I live down in Blackford, which is what you drive past every time you're going south and you pass the Highland Spring factory. Nobody's really too sure where Blackford is, but when you say Highland Spring, I'm sorry the Baxter's tea room is closed at the moment. I'm hoping you find somewhere else to go to the toilets when you travel that far up. They will reopen under the disguise of the distillery and kick Baxter's out, but then you'll have another reason to stop in Blackford, if that's your thing. I'm involved, I previously was involved in Compass Christian Centre. I noticed that made it into the biopic, where we were inviting folk to come as volunteers from huge distances. Could you come and teach skiing for the weekend? Could you come and help in the house for the weekend? Could you come and join our board of trustees? So volunteering takes on all sorts of different shapes and forms. At the moment I'm one of the volunteers at Glencoe Outdoor Centre, which is the forgotten one. So I take the chance to plug it. Everyone knows that SU's got a couple of outdoor centres. They know that the Abernethy Trust exists. Glenshee gets the benefit of 35,000 adverts every year because they're in the SU Holidays brochure. But we've squeezed ourselves in there now. So the water sports camp with SU, for example, is over there at Glencoe. And I'm never quite sure when I'm there teaching at that camp. Am I there because I work for SU? Am I there because I'm a volunteer helping as a trustee at Glencoe? And I dare say for some of you, you cross those divides at times as well. Because if you're a salaried member of staff at a church or whatever, and you minister at our place, you're technically 70% charge, and the problem is that you're doing that because that would be a hobby. If you weren't paid to do it, you'd probably be doing it as a hobby. And possibly you've also managed to find other places to volunteer. So that you do have a difference of approach. You can take the stripes off your shoulder and just become someone who carries responsibility for that one task. But one way or other, you're probably a volunteer in your own right, as well as probably coming here because apparently you're going to be able to recruit and maintain a good team by the end of this session. Which did make me think there was probably three essentials. Well, as long as you can get a PVG form done, as long as they've got a pulse, and the third thing we have to hand out today is a magic wand to be able to make that happen. But we'll see. Our own experience, I'm sure, will enlighten us. I'm involved in Blackford Parish Church, and it's been quite intriguing this past week, being asked alongside my wife to join the elders. And so knowing I was coming to do this session, I was noting, how am I being asked to do this? How is this process going about? And actually, the fact they had gone to the church and said, we need elders, we need 6 more elders. And we're only a church of, a regular attendance is about 35 in Blackford Parish Church. Could you nominate an elder? Could you nominate them? Could you speak to them before you nominate them, and then the elders will meet and discuss who's been put forward, and then we'll begin to approach. So Jane and I then promptly left the service that morning, went off to SU camp to lead a camp, straight from there to holiday, and voting closed without us speaking to anybody either to nominate or to be nominated. So it was quite amusing that 3 days later the minister came on the phone and said, I'd like to talk to you about eldership because your name's been put forward. So marvellous system, all set up in place, all ready to work out, and we'll pick up some of those points later, but not quite. So we were sitting in our kitchen yesterday, and the session clerk's there, and we were getting told a bit more about it. Just the particular nuances that we were interested in. My wife in particular being Baptist, can you have female elders? And a female minister trying to think, is this me she's getting at, or is it a principal question? So that there's going to be difficult questions when you start saying to folk, could you come and help us? Could you join with us? Can we actually work together on this? Can we work through, or are you all going to be clones of me so that you all think the same way? And then that'll make for an excellent team, or would it perhaps not make for an excellent team? We've already had training mentioned to us that they recognise that folk have been invited into being elders either then or in the past or in other churches and never been given any form of induction. never been given any support. And so we've already had that mentioned to us. We've had opportunity to now go away and consider that. So we weren't asked to make a decision absolutely there and then. Funnily enough, we're also asked not to mention that we've been approached. So, because with 6 people, they haven't managed to get right with everybody yet. To be able to say, actually, you've been approached, so mum's the one. But it's intriguing how the other thing was to wait until the new minister was in place, so that we could all get an impression of the new minister. Can I work with them? And she was part of the thing. How did you become a volunteer? What was it that got you into volunteering? You're going to spend a couple of minutes at different times talking to somebody next to you. So you can either decide to talk to somebody that you know, or you can move away from them. Talk to you in the car way over. Tell them, how did you become a volunteer? You may not be a volunteer at the moment, but you must have volunteered at some point. You know, if you're the paid member of staff now, when did you volunteer? Tell them from your experience. Off you go. If you didn't manage to get started, the other person's all that time, maybe have a word with them about at the ends of each row, I've put down some handouts because you pass them along the row. Partly because if you want, hopefully as we talk, you think of people within your situation, or you think of ways that you'd want to handle your situation. So we will do a couple of different things, but it means that the notes are there, and you can. It's also allowed in this session. You get them out at the start so everyone can write it down, and then you give a copy to see how well they've noted it. Or does everyone go, that's fine, I know what the session's about now, I can switch off. But we'll see if we can do it too. So what does our experience tell us? It's probably told us a lot of good things, a lot of bad things, and times when we've been in big teams, and times when we've languished with a small team, and times when we know the team's going well, and times when we've thought, get me out of here. I really don't want to be part of this group anymore. I've made a mistake, or someone else has made a mistake. Wouldn't it be good to just be able to move on and stop that? I hate to be a Persia person coming up to Aberdeen and talking about football. weekend, the Dundee United manager made an interesting mistake which the commentators couldn't help but highlight, because I certainly wasn't going to spot it for myself. He brought somebody off about halfway through the first half because he put his 11 best players onto the pitch and then tried to find a place from each play. And he to bring one of them off. He thought, you're not a left back at all, are you? I shouldn't have been. The poor guy just trudged from way in the far corner even to come off. There are times when a team can be full of tremendous people, and but still isn't a team. It may well be that there's no I in team, but if we rearranged everything, you'd all be looking at me. And we are all looking at me, aren't we? Play with the letters of team and you'll see what happens about it. So our different experiences are worth looking back to. When you're about to try and find folk to join you, then what is it that you got excited about something to join in the first place? What got to you as a 19-year-old that you wanted to get involved with? If you're talking to a 19-year-old about getting involved in your ministry, and you're now 50, don't talk to them like a 50-year-old. Don't try and sell it to them on what's currently motivating you to be involved in ministry. What was it that excited you when you were at that stage? I want to do one more thing before we get into too much more of this. Either unexpectedly or as according to plan, the leader of your church, if that's the event you're involved in, but let's say it's your church anyway, even if the ministry that you're involved with is not local church, but I imagine this situation was for this. They've given you 1 minute during tomorrow morning's service to mention that you need more people to help at your ministry. Okay? You're going to stand up at the front of the church and have 1 minute. Alright? Now if, as I say, you didn't manage to both speak, make sure the person that didn't spoke last time gets their minute first here. Alright? And you've not a lot of preparation, but here you are, you're about to tell folk, we need your help at Sunday school, children's church, Friday night youth club, whatever. Okay, who's talking first? In your peers again, or go. And stop! Change over. Apologies to the groups of three, you're not going to get 3 minutes. Change over. And stop. First intriguing thing about that is, having said you're standing at the front of the church and you're telling people you've got 1 minute to tell the church that you need folk, I'm looking around the room how many dialogues going on. Now, either you go to a very small church, or it does prove the point that although standing at the front may well be part of it, the individual talking to, well, not talking to, it's a talking to, is going to bear much more fruit and dividends. Again, talking to one of my colleagues, said, oh yes, you can stand, but folk don't register. It takes 3 times before any of us hear the message. And I said, well, apparently it's moved on. It's 7 times now. That's why football stadiums are named. One of the football stadiums has changed its name to the Bet365 Arena. And you just think, why would you want to be called that? Because their name will be used. And eventually folk will go, oh, I recognise that name. What was it? So the stand up front will be part of keeping it going, or getting it, but as we'll see, it will only be a very small part. What does the Bible tell us? Well, in principle, it tells us a lot about God. Here am I, send me. You'd like to think of all the other things that Jesus did. More people would copy that part, wouldn't you? We're here, we're talking about volunteers, we're talking about maintaining the team, but it doesn't always have Paul and stepping forward at that point. But he does choose to use people. He could do anything at all, but chooses to bring about most of his work of salvation, most of his work of discipleship, most of his work of individual and church growth through people. And therefore, we ought to get the hang of it. He's empowered people to do his work through the ministry of the Holy Spirit by giving spiritual gifts, and as we'll see, fruit as well. And one of the questions we might get around to looking at is, what is the role of non-Christians within a team? Within Scripture Union, we occasionally get folk who want to help out, because their kid comes home from school every Monday saying how much they enjoy the jam club. And they're a school helper, so could they come along and help? Or a church is doing a holiday club, and some folk in the fringes of your church say, well, yeah, I'd like to help. You've been doing it for 4 years, and my daughter enjoys it, can I come along? And you're going to begin to work through that. Right? What is our policy going to be? What are we happy with? What are we wanting? There's many Christians who would say every time, yes. Because the more we get people saying yes, and then thinking, oh, I'm agreeing with what everything these people are saying. I'm seeing the wisdom of it. Another places who would say, no, unless you're actually able to sign the dotted line without scoring out any of the bits in the form, then no, I don't think there is a place for you. But certainly the work of the bulk of the team has to be done in the light of being inspired by the Holy Spirit. Sadly, but there it is, God did not sit back and wait for people to volunteer. He often went to extraordinary lengths to recruit, and I think that's what we do as well. And to maintain, I've heard a couple of folks saying, well, actually, I'm not short of team, I just want to keep that team as it is, so that I don't become short of team. God spends an awful lot of time building and encouraging. What did Paul do for the bulk of his time? Going round, revisiting, going back to folk. How are you doing? Can I tell you about more? Can I challenge you about what I hear is not quite going right? Either by visiting or by letters. He didn't just set it up and then off he went to do other things. And God sees every ministry as important. Let's dip into Nehemiah, because there's some interesting bits, just to, rather than talk too widely, then just have a closer look here. Nehemiah, or Nehemiah, if you want to do one of the short end of the Bible jokes, is unusual. It appears to be very much his story. Maybe Nehemiah who wrote it, maybe Ezra actually put it down. It's all in the first person. And in chapter 4, we're getting on with it. By verse 6, the people worked hard. We built the walls of Jerusalem halfway up, and all sorts of other things going on. Verse 10 of chapter 4 of Nehemiah. Meanwhile, the people of Judah were singing a sorrowful song. So much rubble for us to haul, worn out and weary. Will we never finish this wall? Our enemies were saying, before those Jews know what has happened, we will sneak up and kill them and put an end to their work. On at least 10 different occasions, the Jews living near our enemies warned us against attacks from every side. And so I sent people to guard the wall at its lower places, and where there were still holes in it, I placed them according to families, and they stood guard with swords and spears and bows and arrows. Then I looked things over and told the leaders, the officials, the rest of the people, don't be afraid of your enemies. The Lord is great and fearsome, so think of him and fight for your relatives, your children, your wives, and your homes. We'll see quite a lot of these 7 points, even just within those handful of verses. If you know the story of Nehemiah, you'll know where that first point comes from. He starts when he immediately hears the news of going off to pray. His response is, how am I going to do this? I've got to take this to God in prayer. But notice, his prayer is not just, God, wake up. God, you've got to do something about Jerusalem. It was about himself. God, how am I going to do this? How am I going to take this on? He wasn't looking for someone else. God, go and get someone to sort that. I'm quite an important person. I can't be expected to do that. He was starting to pray how to do it. And when the opportunity came, that little hour of prayer, and then swallowed hard and spoke to the king and said, here's what I could do. And at that point, he steps in and starts to, what was quite a task, quite an ask of us. I'd like to get time off. I'd like to get time off work to be able to go and do this. I'd like to get some of your resources, King. Could you give me some letters? But his first foundation is that prayer to make things happen. It almost doesn't need to be said, because you've come to a Christian conference about recruiting. And as we'll see, it's one of the few things that sort of perceived national wisdom and good practice doesn't drop in. But it starts with prayer. To be able to say, God, this is your work. You're even more keen that it's done than I am. So let's sort this out. And then Nehemiah goes on with helping families work together. So another one of my colleagues about this session, Ian, and he'd been a minister in Canada at one stage. He would not allow parents just to send kids off to the Sunday school. He says, you've got to be part of it. And on a rota basis, again, one of the verses up on the screen as we were drifting in this morning, teach your child. Not teach your neighbour's child, not teach the kids who come to your church, but teach your child. When they ask, say them to the Passover meal. It's a family way of teaching. Youngest in the family. What's so special at this night? Yes, there's still a few proverbs that says it takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole church to raise a child, if you want to put it in ecclesiastical terms. But ask them, not just because parents have that responsibility, but it allows them to, for their kids to see them doing ministry. For their kids to see that they serve. For their kids to see that they think it's important that the Sunday school that they get sent out to is a Sunday school, a youth club, an outreach event that those as adults want to be at. I know we hope that then also have something in common to talk about. Sure, you can't, well, I dare say you can still ask, so what did you do at Sunday school today? You think, I hope they realise it because I taught the lesson. Clearly there are some folk in this room whose kids are in their youth group and they don't get the right answer when they ask that question. But it's that, just allow that to happen if you can. Look to families and then give them opportunities to serve together. Is it really going to be the best use for the families in your church? If one of them has to come in at 8:30 in the morning for the music rehearsals, and the other one still has to be there at 1:15 because they're on the coffee and lunch rota. Are you helping volunteers across the widest range, or is it just possible that husbands could serve the coffee as well as wives? Is it just possible that you could pull someone off the music rota and say, you know what, I'd like you both to be involved in the same thing together? So asking them to serve as families isn't just, could you work when your kids are? It may also be, it's a possibility that both of you could be involved, that all three of you could be involved, that your teenage son could come along as a helper as well. Look to those, as you probably know from the story, they built the wall next to the house, they served as families. That's what Nehemiah was up to. And then he comes around and he says, let's focus on what's going on here. We read from that part. Turn our minds to God. Clean your glasses, as we heard next door. Because they were turning and looking at the rubble. Not the rubbish, but all the stuff that still had to be rebuilt. All the stones that had been knocked down. And would in time be part of the wall. That would in time be part of what they were trying to achieve. But instead of looking around and seeing all those kids who are still disruptive, all those young helpers who aren't yet able to help, all those people that don't quite turn up in time, He doesn't even say focus on what you have done. He doesn't say have a look at what you have built. We're already halfway up. He turns and says, focus on God. We've heard it already once this morning, but it's worth repeating it. Focus on God. And focus on what the task was. Nehemiah didn't come in saying, I can't believe that the walls are down. He came in and said, I can't believe the disgrace that we, the people of Israel, should be feeling because the walls are not down. What was his ministry? It was to take away the disgrace, not to build walls. So he was looking beyond, it's like, what are you doing here? I'm laying bricks. And you ask the next guy, what are you doing? I'm building a cathedral. And you ask the third guy, what are you doing? I'm building a place to honour God. Focus on, what's the highest point up that you can get folk to focus on at that point? Yes, there's still going to be places to say, right, well, actually, having done that, we now want to focus on some individual tasks and responsibilities. We talk about maintaining a team. Something, a particular theme this week, this month, we're focusing on all being there on time. This month, we're all focusing on, we've got a prayer list for each of our kids, and we're going to use it. We're going to ask each other how we get on with that. So there is a place for focusing on small tasks. And you'll see the logo down in the corner for a book on Nehemiah. I'm quite unashamedly putting it there so you don't think, gosh, Gordon's spent a long time in Nehemiah here. It's a great read. Sometimes you pick up a book and you think, oh, that's good, there's two good ideas in there. Honestly, this has been just pretty solid all the way through. I don't mean solid, of course this is solid, but that's good. And one of the things that I don't want to go into this now, he says, he gave a little acronym, BASE. As you try and give folk tasks to think on, he came up with a very simple mnemonic. I'm not on commission, but it's on Amazon. Give folk a personal meaning as to why they want to be involved. Make sure they're doing the right job. Back to Dundee United last week. The guy was doing the wrong job. He's probably a lovely guy. He's probably a good footballer. He probably had thousands of pounds last week and did less than 45 minutes work. But folk are going to get excited about that particular thing. Some folk will get excited about technology. Come on. When we started doing Holiday Club, we managed to find one of those sort of 23-foot cables that connect a projector to a laptop that we've got here. And I'd be standing at the back of the church operating the sound and the technology of the screen, while Jane, my wife, was at the front doing all the actions, doing all the upfront stuff. That sort of producer-presenter bit that works well, that allows, worst place to be, the first person in charge to be up front. It's nice to be up front, but if you can find someone to be up front instead, all the better. The other challenge was that I always had to be 2.5 beats ahead with the actions. So at the time I did that, Jane saw me do that and could then do that, so that on the beat of the music, the kids could all do that. But now we've got they're now 15-year-olds. They love doing it. I've got to every now and again pull them back and say, look, could you maybe just connect the words from the laptop one again? I know you've brought your own because it allows you to play games on the big screen, but the kids are all just about to come back in. So maybe it'd be good if you could just reconnect it. But they would never, those two kids, for example, don't do group time. They wouldn't be good at group time. Whereas others know nothing about technology, but are a bit like one of Joe's daughters, or Joe's only daughter. He just loves working with kids. Give them what they're actually going to be good at. So, what is it that's going to make a difference to them? And when you ask, this is why we want it. That was one thing I didn't pick up on the Blackburn Elder discussion yesterday. Because of the different skills that people have brought, we are asking them to be involved. Now, in that discussion yesterday, it was never elaborated on as to what those skills were. Jane and I came out of that and we thought, I wonder what they have in mind. I wonder what they're thinking of. Obviously the minister's only been in the door 8 weeks, so she's not able to say what it is. But what is it that says, this is why we would like you to do this job? Or to say, I know you've been here for ages, but what is it you'd actually want to do? Go straight and vote in the team's choice. That'd be dangerous. Well, actually, I don't know if you realise, but I can tell the story better than you could. What? And allow them to move up. So they don't do group work, they tell the story. They make sure that every time they go to group work, there are pens, there are pencils, there are whatever's needed, and they're all sharpened, and they're all working. And everybody else's group gets off to a flying start at that point, rather than, does anyone see where the pencils are? Have you got the sharpener? I bet he's got it. You know, but they would be rubbish at working with children, but they're going to make everybody else's children working with children so much better. Find the thing that is going to make a difference to them, and then recognise it. Another great little idea that came out of this was, certificates. You think, well, that's right, yeah. I'm sure my 35-year-old volunteers are going to be delighted to get a certificate. Discovered what certificate we were coming up with. But they said, do them for the fruit of the Spirit. This year's joyful volunteer is, and telling a few stories as to why you're giving them that certificate. This year's most patient volunteer award goes to, I don't know how you can sort out the patient one and the long-suffering one, you can sort that out. But it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but it still says to someone, it has been noticed how difficult that primary 6 group has been this year. It has been noted how much fun I was having with my 6 boys this year, or with the 2 girls that are part of my group. So I thought, of all the different ways to do certificates and to do recognition, I thought, fruit of the Spirit certificates. Clearly some of us will languish over how can you divide them down when it's a singular fruit, but get over it. Equip for work, equip for war, give them skills, do training, give them the ability, give them the resources, give them materials. What is it they actually need? Whether it's pens or pencils, whether it's space. We've got a danger each time at a camp that I do that we bring everybody so close together they can't hear each other and they get frustrated. They're working with a group. And why do folk leave? Because they're frustrated. You brought them in to work with children and they're just constantly put off with the background noise of the group that's just not that far away. How are you going to equip them for that? And to be able to do that. And then also you're going to war. Nehemiah has them looking at fighting a battle, and as half of them are building a wall, the other half are standing guard. There will be volunteers who would say, well, that's it, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you just to pray. I'd be interested to see how many places we would go to discover that where are the folk praying during children's work. Probably pray before, probably pray after, but we said, I'd like you to help with children's work. Well, I'm not a good child. Wait till you're asking me to do. I'm asking you to come out at the same time as church and just to pray for them during that 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. And depends on what the rest of the service is like, you might have a huge response to that one. But recognising what's going on. Make the connections. Make the connections with their families. Make the connections with what's going on here is at different stages. Nehemiah puts up the call and he says, if you hear the trumpet, gather round. We're working well here, we've got opposition, and there's a guard standing behind you, but every now and again we just need to get together. Rather than spending all the time working with your ministry and doing the ministry, at times it requires us to get the team together and say, right, let's pause, let's reflect, let's take time to train, to do all those things, but also to celebrate outcome of certificates. Let's have a barbecue. If you invite them around to your house, they'll be more than happy to come, particularly if there's food. And just to take folk aside for a minute or two. And then our example. I remember as a scout leader years ago, the magazine used to say, if you want a few minutes by yourself, at the end of a busy session, sweep the floor. And it's possibly still true. Well, that you do deal with a kid who's just been sick, that you do deal with the days when you're not there, you've set up things well, as best you can. That the times when when the projector kicks off and disappears and it doesn't work out, you've got something up your sleeve rather than just turning around and saying, now leaders, could you just fill the gap for the next few minutes? That you are doing it. I mean, it's one of the strange parts about the book of Nehemiah, that he keeps saying, Lord, remember me for all that I have done here. Now, obviously I'm West of Scotland, so I would never manage to say that. I dare say any Scottish person would never quite manage to say it. But even if we're not saying it, to be able to keep that team thinking, I'm glad I'm part of that team, it's because they look to you and say, yeah, I'm learning just by watching. I'm feeling valued just by being here. All those different bits and pieces will keep them together. Those are lessons from the Bible. They're there in the book of Nehemiah. I say that they're there within that book. But the fun thing is, when you go to perceived wisdom, flip over that page. What does good national practice tell us? Volunteer Scotland, if you've been around a long, long time, this is called Volunteer Development Scotland. That's their top tips. There's quite a few of those things have come out about what we've just been talking about. You may well be thinking, I'm leading this, how can I add to that? Notice what we did with our elders. Dedicate others to go recruiting. How do you get customer service? Try and be as flexible as possible. Open up the possibilities. One of the things that issue is folk who we need travel leaders from time to time, and they just come down the A9 in a minibus and then go back up by train, having dropped off kids at camp. We put in our adverts at one stage in our magazines at one point, we'd like folk to join our committees, our national board, or if you've got experience that could advise us, what we've done recently. We've got an amazing number of people that turn up at Lenjamure just to help cook meals and do dishes. And you thought, well, that's more staffing job. She'll everyone gets involved in she wants to be involved in working with children. Not necessarily. So provide that sort of range. As you can see, can we accommodate teams and group opportunities? Oh look, there's the word family in there again. The other reason for mentioning that, rather than just for the sake of repeating it, that volunteerscotland.net website in the bottom corner produces all manner of resources which are all free and available. Some of these organisations you've got to have joined them before you can track down. But what would it look like if you're the sort of organisation that needs a volunteer agreement, that looking for good practice models, that needs a discipline procedure? What would it look like? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with difficult volunteer? There are downloads and handouts and all those different bits and pieces on Volunteer Scotland's website. Notice 2 or 3 things on the final page. There are 2 great models of teamwork. I'm sure there's been more thinking on teamwork since the 70s, but nonetheless, notice that if we get too focused on just achieving the task, we probably won't have a team left. So when you're looking at the core of your ministry, in what way are we able to disciple people? If all we've done at the end of it is run a good Sunday school for a year, and none of the team have changed, if none of them have developed, have we actually achieved what we were setting out to do? Partly I'm saying that to free you up from the responsibility, to be able to say, you know what, it's just as important that we spend time developing these team members, and not to feel that, well, we haven't got time to develop these people because we're running Sunday school. Do you need someone else up alongside you who's doing that recruiting? Someone's talked in our church that, well, now we get a new minister, everything will be a few more, bygones will be bygones, and we'll all move on sweetly. Clearly they don't know this pattern or this model, that there's a storming period. So don't be too put off when you bring new folk in and you pull a new team together and it's not quite working out. Because that's going to happen. That's a typical thing within a team. Notice the adjourning word at the end there. Some of the models refer to it as mourning. Yes, there's a time to decide, you know what? We're moving on. We've stopped. It's time to, and when I'm looking at my watch, it's time to stop. But it's not always that negative. Adjourning, as you can see from the graphic, could also be that element of celebration. Just to take time. Isn't that who, what, when, why? As it folk come to mind, what is it we most need people to do? It could be, what do I need to do to be able to, what is it that as a team we are currently lacking? You know, go back through Nehemiah's principles. Who's the best person to do that? Is it me? Is it someone else? When am I going to set time aside to do that? Do I need to speak to someone tomorrow morning? Next week? Do I need to have a word with a couple of other folk who say, actually, I think there's a place for Johnny in our team? And why is it that I want to speak to them? So that when you go and say to them, look, Johnny, we'd like you to join the team. This is why. It's not just because you've got a pulse. Right? It's because the particular gap we have is this. So think through those things. Jump with confidence. Think through, plan it out. If you replay in your own mind, we're not going to redo it, but plan out in your mind. If you had the chance again to speak at the front of the church and tell folk why you need people, would you have excited them about the focus of your ministry? Would you have told them a couple of stories, even in that minute, as to what's been happening recently? Not what's not happened because you haven't got enough team members, but what's happened. What has God done in the ministry? What kind of person are you looking for? Is it just, we love some volunteers, and then still don't be too surprised when folk come and say, how's it going? Just told you last week. But allow for the fact that you can have several opportunities, and you would need to take several opportunities. Not every volunteer is going to be a successful contribution to your team. Here's a little disaster. Reflect on that as to what Nehemiah would have done in that situation. Lord God, thank you for a gospel that changes lives. Thank you for a ministry that you've opened up to people to be involved with. Help us as we engage with those who we do ministry with this week to express our value of them as team members, to identify who else can help us, to be thankful for what you're doing in the lives of the children and young people and the team who we engage with, to enlighten us who else could be involved and how we could keep